the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Here.
Councilman McCarthy.
Here.
Councilman Wareham.
Here.
Councilman Craig.
Here.
Good evening. Tonight's meeting is on the preliminary budget of the town of Smithtown. It's a meeting that's required by law, and all questions or statements must be related to the contents of the budget or relative to the budget. Okay. Does anybody wish to be heard on the budget? Yes. Mr. Marty Katz.
Good evening, folks. I have basically the 2016 budget was very impressive. It's over 192 pages. Was it done in-house or was it purchase of service? Did you hire a consultant or an auditors to do your budget?
No, we have a controller, and there's somebody who's appointed as a budget director.
Okay, fine. The 2014 budget and the 2014 actual, is the actual numbers certified numbers in the budget?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The 2014 budget and the 2014 actual, are the actual numbers certified numbers or in-house numbers?
Every budget is audited throughout the year by an auditor.
Certified?
Yes,
Okay. What percentage is your admin to your total cost?
I don't know what that means.
Overhead. Overhead, admin, like all your salaries to the total cost of running all the other programs. Is it
Okay,
20%, 10%? Because Como now has a thing that your admin has to be certain percentage of your total cost. If you don't know, then I'll go on.
No, we do know. We've met that cap.
What is it? Is it 20% of your
It's,
admin?
0.07, 0.73
0.73?
of the last year's levy.
Okay. Now, your type of budget that you have, is it a line item budget or a zero-based budget?
Line item budget.
Line item budget. The line item budget means that you could move from one to the other. Can
Correct.
you also move from like your transportation or the highway or your sanitation or fire? Could you move it or it must stay within that?
No, that's a qualified answer. There are different funds, and different funds are different tax base. So you could not intersperse funds that are taxation
okay, I got
for the
you.
highway into the general fund.
Okay, I got it.
And vice versa.
Now, for argument's sake, if the highway runs over because of snow, say you budget 10,000, it's 20,000, where do you get the other 10,000 to pay for the overtime?
Okay. We always build in an additional contingency or surplus.
Okay, time out.
Okay.
That's the contingency now. That's on the balance sheet, right?
Yes.
What is it, investments, cash? And when do you use that contingency? Because theoretically, whatever's in the contingency, you should have put in the cash. And the investments, what type of investments does Smithtown have? Is it in money markets, or do you have a gatekeeper who does all your investments?
The town invests its money in 3 or 4 depositories, banks,
Mhm.
and the banks that are chosen on the basis if they pay the proper interest or higher than another bank. That's the way
I
that-
know I'm over my time, but inasmuch as no other people are here,
Sure.
could I continue
Sure.
questioning?
Sure.
Okay. Now, the budget, when it's done, do you have your program directors helping you, or do you annualize it? In other words, you take seven months actual in 2015, you annualize it to the year, and then what percentage of 2015 budget compared to 2016, what's going to be your cap? 2% additional, 1%? Or how do you actually do the process of your
The
budgets?
cap is set by New York State. This year, the cap was 0.73, which means the levy can only be 0.73 over the previous levy of
Right.
the prior year.
But the budget itself, does your program directors give you a wish list of how to do
Yes,
budgets?
every
Or
department,
is it annualized, taking
every
your
department,
actual?
every department submits an annual budget for the coming year.
Okay, now the last thing, and I want, could we have the capability of looking at your balance sheet to see what you have in cash, what your payables are, what your ratios,
Well-
current asset? Is
Yeah.
that included in the budget?
We have an ordered financial statement which we'll make available to you, and it'll tell-
How do you get that?
I'll get it to you.
Okay, fine, because what really bothers me is that you have contingency funds.
Right.
Say it's $10,000 or $1 million. I don't think the taxpayers, even though you may run into a deficit at the year end, should be taxed more. I think you should start using a little of the money that's in the contingency fund to help the people, especially for the elderly and the people that don't have money, instead of increasing the budget and increasing the people to pay the additional funds. Say, for argument's sake, you have $3 million in the contingency fund. What is that money used for, and how do you get the money into
Your
that
example is
contingency
wrong.
fund? Excuse me?
Contingencies are limited to the potential that that department may run out. Use the example of snow.
Right,
So there's a budget for snow contingent on a normal snowfall.
right.
And as you all know, the last winters there have not been normal snowfalls. So the contingency funds make up for the money that needs to be expended when they run out of the original budgeted fund.
Right. See, now with the line item budget, going back to the line item budget, say for salaries you go over by 10,000, and say your supplies you go under the 10,000, could you do a budget mod and move that money
Yes,
around?
yes.
Now, when you do it, who approves you moving that
The
money?
town council has to approve every budget transfer.
Every budget mod
That's correct,
on that.
yes.
And also, do you have any contracts which are deficit funding? In other words, does the county of Smithtown have like a local library or somebody where they have their budget, which is a deficit budget, means say you give them 10,000 and they have to come back?
The
and
budget,
you
this budget,
only, it's
hold
on,
on, this
because I,
budget of Smithtown relates only to the town of Smithtown.
right, because I saw in there you have hospital, you have other,
No.
other things in the budget.
In the budget, there are 2 ambulance districts
Right, that, right.
that the
And
town
the
has.
shelter, the animal shelters
Well,
in
you have to
there?
let me finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There are 2 ambulance districts which contract with the town of Smithtown. The ambulance districts give us an amount of money they think they need for the ensuing year. Town board and the controller, we decide what we think is an adequate increase for their budget.
Could I ask you for 2015, do you project a deficit or a surplus? And and if it is, what do you feel you should know already, it's October, what your year-end numbers should be. Not in the ballpark, if you annualize it and do it right. Is Smithtown running in the red? Are they running in
No, no,
black or what?
we're in the black.
You're in the black. So let me ask you then, if you're in the black, why are you going to increase people's taxes? Why can't you use that black to take care of some of the increases that you want to give next year to the people, especially for the elderly and
Yeah,
for people
yeah.
who are disabled and stuff like that? Why can't we use that black instead of
Well, I'll
increasing?
tell you why, if you allow me.
Sure, sure.
And I'm happy to give you a copy of a report that we just got from Moody's. Rating agencies prefer that municipalities have certain percentages of their budgets in what is called reserve or surplus funds. They look askance at a town when it uses surplus funds to balance its budgets. And if we do that, we are then penalized with the bond rating.
Right,
So when we go to borrow, we're going to pay a higher interest rate.
right, right. So therefore, because of the percentage, we can't use any of the surpluses to offset any of the taxes that individuals will have
It
the
doesn't say
following year.
you can't,
Okay.
but if you do, it ultimately will result in a diminished bond rating.
Right, that I know. Now, also, do you have a capital budget for equipment?
We do,
And the board approves that also?
absolutely.
Is there a wish list that all your directors give for the capital budget?
No, every item in the capital budget is determined by the town board to be a necessary item in the capital.
In other words, like you need an additional fire engine, or if you need capital, you know,
That's correct.
equipment or computers
Correct.
and all that. So you do have a capital
Yes,
budget, which is
absolutely.
approved with your normal budget. And now I'm going to ask you a really silly question. The budget, how is it approved? Do the voters vote on it, or does the board approve the 2016 budget?
Now, the law requires the town supervisor to produce what is called a tentative budget. That is submitted to the entire town board for their approval or disapproval or changes. Once it's advertised for, as it was for tonight, that's called the preliminary budget.
Mhm.
After tonight's hearing, if the town board wishes to make changes, it can, and it has to be done prior to November 20th.
So it's not like a school board budget where the community goes into the school and votes
No.
for the budget.
It's not
So
required by
basically-
state law.
So basically, the budget is passed by the council, or you don't have a finance committee, do you? Or
No.
of that?
No.
So basically, the folks here, if, you know, approve the budget, basically? Okay,
Correct.
and, all right.
All right?
And I thank you very much.
Thank you for your,
You
thank
know,
you.
for your question.
Your
you know.
questions were enlightening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Did she just come in, Bob? This one's new.
The budget.
Okay. Diane Madden?
Hi, good evening. Actually, I have a letter I'll save for the next meeting, but I do have some questions about the animal shelter budget.
Okay.
The first question would be, what is the budget right now? I was privileged to have seen the preliminary budget, which I wasn't very happy about, but I'd like to know what has changed on that budget, what the budget is. I have a few questions.
Is that your question? How much is the budget for the animal shelter? Is that your question?
Well, that's my first question.
Get my glasses. I got it. The total budget for the animal shelter is $688,818.
I'm sorry?
$688,818.
And could you please tell me what last year's budget was?
Was $691.
It was bigger last year, is that what you're saying?
It was $3,000 less, more.
What does that tell you?
Doesn't tell you very much because
It
there are
tells me
many-
an awful lot.
No, it
You wanted
doesn't.
to make this
No.
a model shelter.
No,
That
it
tells me an
doesn't
awful
because
lot.
there are many factors in a budget.
Okay. Could you let me know what amount of money has been set aside for a behaviorist?
For
And
what?
For a behaviorist, a behavior
Um,
slash program coordinator. Probably the second most important position in a shelter.
We have a part-time administrator, a 14, part-time salary.
We have a part-time salary
That's the services they do.
to do that.
A part-time salary, how
Yes.
much would that be?
$14,000.
$14,000? For a part-time behaviorist?
No, that's not a behavior. Where's that big number here?
It's this whole thing. Socialize and increase adoptability.
How much is that?
That's all part of the, that's part of the role of the 14,500.
Why don't you explain that to her? Here.
May I introduce myself? I'm Don Musnug. I'm the town controller, and
Thank you.
relative to the animal shelter. Last year's budget was $691,000. The current proposed budget is $688,000, a reduction of 0.4%, or $3,023. There was a reduction in salaries of about $91,000,
Right.
of which all but $3,000 was reallocated to other lines within the animal shelter budget. Principally, $45,500 was allocated, an increase of $45,500 to professional services. The prior budget had $4,500. The current budget has $50,000. Relative to a behaviorist, I should also point out, too, that the total requested budget was $705,000. The total budget that was put in was $688,000. So all but $16,200 was provided for. And relative to the part-time salary responsibilities for the part-time kennel attendant, they're to do the part of the maintenance of the building, the escort visitors, dog play groups to socialize and increase adoptability, new dog walk schedule in the morning and before close, and also to provide some nighttime coverage.
And how much is that salary?
That salary is $14,560.
Supervisor, you understand that this shelter was supposed to be undergoing a complete reform. To say that you've set aside $14,000 for a behaviorist that's supposed to be a program coordinator and develop programs that are vacant yet is nowhere near going to resemble the model that you promised the community the shelter would be. You have to spend money. And to take money from salaries and put it into another area.
I don't know what you mean by what we promised. I don't know who made that promise.
Well, you made that promise
What was that promise?
to reform that shelter and make it a model
Well, we
shelter.
think we did. And by the way, every budget that's submitted by a department head is scrutinized and gone over with. This is basically the budget that was submitted by the department director. And that's what we allocated.
So this budget was submitted by the director, and
Every
she's...
department head submits a budget.
Mhm.
It's gone over with the controller and myself.
So you're telling me, but Susan's here, can speak for herself, is satisfied with $14,000 for a behaviorist?
No, the $14,000 part-time position was just to supplement the kennel attendants. That's a part-time kennel attendant position. The behaviorist trainer is within the other line item that's called professional services. Professional services went from approximately $4,500 to, I think, $5,500. I'm sorry, $55,000. So it's roughly about $50,000 allocated to professional services, which could be potentially used for a behaviorist trainer.
So that could be a full-time position then? I understand.
Potentially, that there's other needs that the shelter is considering, and will take into consideration different suggestions, and we'll see.
Well, you're the director. I'm curious to know if you think this is a this is a position that develops the programs. So you're saying you're taking...
Absolutely. It's important to do all those things that you had defined as that a behaviorist / trainer would do. It involves the job description. I think that you might have developed includes a number of skill sets. I don't know for sure that one person can satisfy all those skills.
Well, that was a contracted. That's after. And by the way, we were never offered part-time for this position, but that was after we were told that the town board turned down hiring a full-time behaviorist, and then that was for a contracted position. So everything we put in that job description would have covered those programs to implement and create those programs and get them launched.
I believe what was turned down was the actual title of behaviorist / trainer for various reasons, including that it wasn't a civil service title.
Here's the civil service title. You've been lied to, okay? At a meeting,
Mrs.
we were
Madden,
given, this
Mrs.
is a civil
Madden,
service title.
Mrs. Madden, We have to relate this to the budget.
Okay, this is a
Not
budget.
about somebody like, let me also say,
But,
do you live-
but I think it's
may I
important for the
ask you a
director to
question?
understand that.
Do you live in Smithtown?
No, actually, I took criticism because I
I
don't,
wa-
but
I'm
actually,
asking
I was
you
the
a
only
que-
one that stood
I'm
up for
just
the animals and
asking
said
you a
this isn't
question.
right.
Do you live in Smithtown?
I don't live in Smithtown.
Okay. This town board and this budget is responsible to the people of Smithtown. You heard the gentleman ask the question earlier. Are we under any
Well,
kind of
why
a
didn't you give me this
restriction?
lecture when they put me on an advisory council?
I
In
didn't
any
put you on-
case,
I don't know anything about an
Susan,
advisory council.
this is the civil service title we were given. You might want to take a look at it. I brought a copy for every member because it's important to me that all of town council understands from here forward.
I'm familiar with that. That's the education specialist.
Right, and it's along the lines of similar job description.
Right, and at the time, that particular position was not included as an option. However, there was another option that we were going to consider, and that would have been to contract an outside service, and the budget does allow for up to $50,000 for that purpose.
Okay, but this was the position that just needed to be reopened, so you understand that. You're saying that it was denied. The board never knew about it, so I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Nussbaum? Is it I'm sorry, is it Baum? Nussbaum?
I just want to talk regarding the budget at the animal shelter for a
Say it again.
behaviorist or trainer. That with all the financial restrictions going around and the tight budgets, I don't see any reason why for 9 or 10 dogs that reside there, you would need a full-time dog trainer. It seems that any outside contractor on a part-time basis or even a salaried part-timer could do the job just fine. So that's, I don't think there were any real promises etched in stone. You were going to get a full-time, but take a half a loaf instead of a full loaf if there are problems with the budget. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Yvonne Katz?
I am questioning Mr. McCarthy's raise of salary. He told me on an email he cannot handle the Hapog Industrial Park violations, that Mr. Wareheim should take over the job. Okay,
What
I
does
don't
that have to do with the
understand.
budget?
It's not
Mrs.
true,
Katz?
first of
This
all.
has something to do
This
with
is
the
a budget
budget
hearing.
because I am questioning the qualifications and the purpose of the board. You are giving raises to unqualified people, okay, that are doing absolutely nothing for the people in my community. They are destroying the quality of our lives. You're spending, I don't know what amount of money in equipment that claims to be antennas for wireless service. And the frequencies that you are using in my community are killing us, are killing wildlife. Okay, I don't know how do you know what is doing to our lives? Waking us up with 100 decibels of noise at 4:03 in the morning to cover the violations at the Hapog Industrial Park. Mr. McCarthy is not doing his job, and you are giving him salaries, and you cannot hire a trainer,
I can answer this.
a behaviorist for the animals. You want to answer?
Yeah, I'll
Please
answer that.
answer
That's fine.
because
I
I
can-
have that email.
Mrs. Katz,
I'm not,
let's
I
not be
hate this.
confrontational.
I'm sorry, but
Okay, thank you.
well, I can answer the question anyway, Supervisor.
You want to put it on the record? Do it.
Yes. I answered Mrs. Cat, and she said Mr. Wareheim had the solution for her problem. I said I'd be more than happy to turn it over to Mr. Wareheim. If he has the solution, I would work with him, period. That's it.
What's his name? Greg Daly? Greg Daly? Greg Daly?
At the last town meeting, a speaker and I raised the issue of a CAFR. The acronym is CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports. Side note, though, the issue that Ms. Katz raised about the military-grade acoustic weaponry is a viable
We have to
threat
talk
to
about the
to
budget,
to the
Mr.
community.
Daly.
That's a side note.
Mr.
But
Daly, you have to, your marks have to deal with the budget.
yeah, so the CAFR, back to the CAFR. Anyway, annual financial reports, which is budgetary related. Now, the budget, of course, is a arbitrary forecasting tool for 1 year. The CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is a stockpiling of hundreds of millions of dollars over decades. Now, if we just use Mr. Vecchio's incumbency of 38 years as an example, I can't even begin to assess how much money that is. But anyway, Ms. Nowick last meeting was gracious enough to accommodate our questions about her knowledge of the CAFR. She was honest enough to admit that she has absolutely no idea what a CAFR is. So I'm asking each board member individually and collectively if they are familiar with this budgetary financial instrument. I know the controller does, called CAFR. Now, as I said before, every local government is required by law, statute, and mandate to, of course, archive their CAFRs. And as I purported before and stipulated that over the decades, hundreds of millions of dollars are stockpiled into these accounts. They're named and they're given arbitrary names, contingency fund this, contingency fund that. Now, that is raised because then we look at the budget, and which is the annual, of course, forecasting tool. And most, for the last, let's say last year sometime, Smithtown reported that they had a budgetary shortfall. How is that when you have hundreds of millions of dollars in the CAFR accounts, which can be transferred into the budget to fill these shortfalls? So, first question, individually and collectively, does the board, its members, individually and collectively, know what a CAFR is, barring the controller?
What is?
CAFR, C-A-F-R, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Allow me to say this to you. All budgets are produced under the guise of New York State law.
I'm familiar with that.
We are required by law to have an audit,
I'm familiar with that.
an independent audit.
I'm familiar with that.
And we are also audited, if you will, by bond rating companies.
That's suspect.
And this budget must pass muster for the state of New York.
Okay. But the question still stands.
I don't know what your question is.
No, well, this question still stands.
You know what a
Does the
ban
board?
is, a BAN?
I beg your pardon?
You know what a BAN is?
What is it?
I'm not going to tell you because I don't
Okay,
know
well, all right.
what you know.
Okay. Well, but the question still stands. Does the board, individually, its members, and collectively understand what a CAFR is? Yes or no?
What a CAP is?
CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Because if you're oblivious to this fact,
What?
you should be running a town.
Well, then tell them that.
A CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is a report that includes statistical information
True.
as it is distinctive from an annual audited financial statement.
True.
We use a very well-respected auditing firm, Albrecht Vigiano Zurich and Company. They perform a lot of audits on Long Island. And we received our 2014 audited financial statements. We do not and are not required to produce a CAFR. And the only distinction between the audited financial statements that AVZ produces for us and a CAFR is the statistical information that's included in a CAFR.
Okay,
And
so
we
you're
don't
saying
do
you have
that.
statutory exemption not to file a CAFR?
It's not a statutory, we are not required to. There's no exemption, we didn't get an exemption. No town is required to file a CAFR. If they elect to do a more comprehensive financial report other than the audited financial statement, they may do so. Many do.
Well, that's contrary to generally accepted practices. And again, why isn't Smithtown allowed or required to file a CAFR? Under what provision?
The state doesn't require us to file a CAFR. We file an audited financial statement, and we file our
So you're
annual,
saying
our
you you have a
AUD.
state exemption from the federal requirement and mandate?
No, he's saying that.
I understand what he says, Mr.
No, he's
Vecchio.
saying that
I'd like
the
him to speak
filing
for
of the
himself.
audited report is sufficient for the state of New York.
Thank you for your interpretation. So,
That is correct.
sir, so you're saying you have an exemption from the state of New York requiring you by federal mandates and statute to file a CAFR.
The state of New York does not require us to
Okay.
file a
Okay,
CAFR.
it's on record. Okay, so now back to the amounts in the CAFR. Is it made,
Can we refer to this budget, and that's the purpose of this hearing?
well, I can't be pigeonholed into my questions, Mr.
Well, I'm
Vecchia. So
asking you,
I'm
can you
addressing
refer to this?
the
Well, that's the
budget
purpose
in its
of this hearing.
entirety, as well as the CAFR, which, of course, relates to the budget. So, can the CAFR reports, or the statutory, the statistic reports, as you call them, can they be conspicuously be available? Can they be made conspicuously available to residents? And where can we find them?
If we prepared one, it would be made available,
You
but
said
we
s-
don't,
you
we
said
don't
st-
prepare a CAFR.
Okay,
We
you said-
prepare an audited financial statement.
Okay,
For which the supervisor said earlier he would provide that if requested.
Okay, so by FOIL, is that it?
It's online.
Tell you what,
It's online.
come to my office tomorrow and I'll give it to you.
10 years worth?
Say that again?
10 years worth? I'm
got
thorough,
it.
so I want 10 years worth, minimum 5.
I'm not understanding you.
He's saying he wants 10 years worth from you.
Well, then you ought to put in a foil and maybe we'll get 10 years,
25 cents a copy.
the documents.
Okay, in closing though, I have to compliment Sue Hansen. I couldn't distinguish who Ms. Hansen was 2 months ago from another person in the mall, but
Are
I tell you
relating
what.
your statements to the budget?
Yes, it is. After meeting her, I could tell that she has a genuine affinity for animals, and working with her for the last 3 weeks, that's been confirmed. I tell you, she's an asset to the town and to the animal shelter, and I look forward to working with her further because she has implemented, just in less than a quarter, programs and policies that enrich what we call our companions with tails lives. I'd like to compliment her on that. Thank you much.
She spoke Yvonne Katz. She spoke, right? Yes. Bill Nussbaum spoke. Pete Daly. Mr. Katz spoke. And Mrs. Katz spoke. Anybody else to be heard on the budget? If not, I'll close the meeting.
Second.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.